So, I have to tell you about this one weird evening that, honestly, felt like we'd accidentally wandered into one of those suspense movies you only see on late night TV. It started when my roommate Jake completely lost it over a package that just showed up at our door. Now, this wasn't an Amazon Prime kind of package with our names plastered all over it. No, this thing had no name, no return address, nothing that made sense. Just a label covered in what looked like some kind of secret code or maybe gibberish scratched on with a Sharpie. I was just chilling on the couch, half watching some show about conspiracy theories because Jake always insists on educating me on weird stuff. That night felt different, though. I remember Jake jumping up the moment that delivery box thumped onto the floor outside our door. He nearly knocked over the plant in his rush to pick it up. He squinted at the label like it was written in ancient hieroglyphics or something. Then, with this totally serious voice, he goes, "Dude, this is not normal, look at this." Holding it up, all somehow conspiratorial, as if the package itself was whispering secrets to him. I just raised an eyebrow. "It's a box, man. Might be a mistake." Jake was already scanning the doorway like some private eye. No name, no address, nothing. Either this is a prank or we've just been drafted into some weird mystery. I had to admit, it set my brain ticking. Why would someone send a package with no clear label to a high-rise full of apartments? Especially to us, in a building where half the neighbors barely know each other's names? The streets outside buzzed with their usual city chaos car horns, chatter, sirens, but in our little apartment, the presence of that box suddenly felt like a secret waiting to explode. And then, just as I was about to shrug it off and grab a beer, Jake goes, "We can't just ignore this. What if it's important? Or dangerous?" He looked at me like he was ready to don a detective hat or something. I laughed because, well, that's Jake for you. Always the overly curious one who treats every little oddity like it's a matter of national security. But even I felt that little jolt of what if. That moment right there, that tiny crack in the evening's routine, was the start of something that neither of us saw coming. So yeah, there we were. Me, the reluctant observer, and Jake, the suddenly obsessed detective in the making, standing by a cryptic package that somehow sucked us into its mystery. And honestly, neither of us had the faintest clue where this would go next. Jake and I had been roommates for about a year by then, sharing this tiny two-bedroom apartment perched above a noisy street in the city. I'm the more laid-back one, the type who's happy to binge-watch something mindless after work or just zone out scrolling through my phone. Jake, on the other hand, he's got this insatiable curiosity that's equal parts impressive and, honestly, exhausting. Like he wants to know everything about every little thing that crosses our path. Sometimes I think he's part detective, part overenthusiastic podcast host. Our apartment is modest, filled with mismatched furniture and a collection of those half-dead houseplants I'm too lazy to replace. Jake's cluttered desk always looks like a command center for some covert operation, stacks of notebooks, random gadgets, and half-written theories sprawled everywhere. I usually try to stay out of his projects, but this package had a way of dragging me in. When the mysterious box landed by the door that night, Jake immediately snapped into full-on investigation mode. He was pacing back and forth, flipping the package over, tapping on the cryptic label like it might reveal secrets if he just stared hard enough. I'm sitting there trying not to roll my eyes too much, but even I had to admit this felt pretty weird. No name, no return address. "It's like whoever sent this wanted to vanish into thin air," Jake murmured, eyes wide behind his glasses. I raised a skeptical eyebrow. Maybe someone just botched the label, dumb mistake. But deep down, I knew it was more than that. The code on the box wasn't your everyday scribble. It looked like something out of a puzzle book Jake would obsess over for hours. Jake was already diving into his detective routine, which, unfortunately for both of us, usually involves dragging me into his schemes. "We're not telling the building manager," he said firmly. "If this is some prank or a weird delivery mix-up, I don't want word getting out and causing a scene. We handle this." Quietly, I sighed. That's the thing about Jake, once he picks a nosy mission, there's zero backing down. But I couldn't blame him. The idea of some anonymous package just appearing on our doorstep without explanation, it was enough to make anyone's imagination spiral. As if that wasn't enough, Jake started to whip out his phone and cross-reference the symbols on the label with some online forums and cryptography sites, mumbling about substitution ciphers and secret codes. I'm lying on the couch, watching him jump between apps, ever so often glancing over at me like I should be getting just as hyped. I wasn't there yet, but the way his eyes sparkled made me think he was already convinced this was the start of something big. So, without telling anyone else in the building, because, honestly, the idea of involving the manager felt like inviting a parade of unwanted questions, we agreed to dig deeper. Jake insisted on collecting every tiny shred of information, while I volunteered as the support, which mostly meant making coffee and keeping an eye on the package so it didn't mysteriously disappear. Evening crept past midnight, and we hadn't made much progress except fueling Jake's theories. He paced near the door again, shining his phone flashlight over the package as if a hidden message might magically appear. Meanwhile, I was staring out the window at the city lights flickering below, wondering whose hands this box had passed through and why it had landed with us of all people. That night felt thick with possibilities, the kind you only get when something completely unexpected disrupts your routine. Jake was buzzing with that nervous energy of a man on a mission. I just hoped his detective instincts didn't drag us into anything worse than a harmless prank. But the more we poked around, the more we realized this little box wasn't just some lost delivery. It was a doorway to a mystery, and somehow Jake had already decided we were diving headfirst into it, even if I was still trying to figure out how to gracefully back out. Jake's detective fever only escalated as the days slipped by, turning our apartment into a sort of unofficial investigation hub. The moment we started, I thought maybe this would be a quick thing, a bit of harmless curiosity that fizzled out. But man, was I wrong. It began with Jake scrutinizing the delivery person who dropped off the package, a dude named Carlos who worked for some third-party courier nobody seemed to know much about. One afternoon, Jake decided to accidentally run into him in the hallway. I was there, trying not to look too conspicuous as Jake asked Carlos all these awkward, pointed questions about whether he'd seen anything unusual. Carlos was weirdly evasive. At first, he said the package wasn't his usual delivery. Then he flicked his gaze around like he was worried someone was listening, and finally mumbled something about strange orders from the company that sent it. Jake, eyes gleaming like he'd found a vital clue, took all this as proof that the package was part of some bigger secret. Meanwhile, I was getting antsy. Every now and then, I'd catch Jake staring at the cryptic label on the box, tracing the strange symbols. These jagged shapes and dots that looked like a mix of ancient script and a bad font from some video game cheat code. He'd tried everything, online translation tools, cryptography forums, even contacting amateur codebreakers on Reddit. Nothing clicked. One evening, Jake burst in like a kid who'd just stumbled on a treasure map. He'd been snooping around the building, chatting with neighbors when he noticed Mrs. Kinley from down the hall acting particularly shifty. She's that nosy kind who always knows what's going on in everyone's apartment but usually keeps it to herself. But that night, Jake swore he saw her peeking out from behind the curtains, then scurrying away the moment someone approached. He dragged me into a haphazard stakeout near her door, and I swear I hadn't been less interested in a person since that time I tolerated a 3-hour lecture on the history of bread. But Jake was whispering with the intensity of a conspiracy theorist at a secret club meeting. Why would she care about the package? I whispered, half hoping I was going to be told we were dealing with some mundane mix-up and could all go back to normal. Jake shook his head, voice low but determined. That's exactly why. Nobody spies unless it's important. We barely slept those nights, caught between the package mysteriously moving from the corner of our hallway to just outside our apartment door one morning, and strange noises from neighbors we'd never really paid attention to. There was that one evening when I swear I caught distant, muffled voices talking about the delivery and warnings to keep quiet. I tried to tell Jake we might be reading too much into all this, that maybe the package was some forgotten prop from a nearby theater or a neighbor's tangled secret. But Jake wasn't having any of it. This is bigger, man, he insisted, pacing through the apartment like a caged animal. And we're the only ones who know. We have to see it through. I felt the weight of what that meant for us, for the thin thread of normalcy left in our lives. But as much as I was skeptical and, frankly, a little annoyed that the mystery was dragging us into weird hours of sleepless creeping around the neighborhood, I couldn't pull away. There was something contagious about Jake's obsession, like suddenly the boring bits of city life buzzed with hidden meaning. One night, as I was drifting off, I caught Jake murmuring into his phone about meeting with some online contact who claimed expertise in local urban mysteries and covert deliveries. The way he talked was half exhilaration, half paranoia. That's when I knew this was no longer a casual puzzle for him. Jake had become a full-time detective in a case that was starting to take on a life of its own, one pushing at the edges of our quiet lives, quietly unraveling the safe little bubble of our tiny apartment. And honestly, I wasn't sure if we were ready for whatever was coming next. After nearly a week of what felt like living inside one of those detective shows we'd half-joked about, Jake finally cornered the delivery guy, Carlos, right in the lobby. I tagged along because, well, someone needed to talk Jake down if things got weird again. And you know what? It actually worked out, sort of. Carlos wasn't quite expecting us, and his expression slid from, "Oh no, here comes trouble," to something like genuine relief when Jake blurted out, "Hey look, we just want to know what's up with that mysterious package. No harm, no foul." He hesitated, looking around the well-lit lobby like he was deciding whether to trust two nosy city dwellers or vanish into the night, but then he sighed and spilled the beans. Turns out the package wasn't some clandestine weapon or underground secret society stash. Nope, it was just a screw-up. Apparently, Carlos worked for this tiny courier service that sometimes got hired for quirky requests, like surprise gifts or art pieces that needed extra care. This particular box was supposed to go to an artist's studio. That cryptic label? It was actually a kind of internal code to identify the art collective who commissioned the piece. The no name, no address thing was meant to keep the delivery discreet because the artist had a reputation for spontaneous installations and didn't want the neighbors asking questions. Carlos gave us a small chuckle. Honestly, buddy, people get real worked up over boxes. I just deliver them and move on. The strange orders he mentioned were just a bunch of oddball requests from eccentric clients. Nothing thrilling, just a living. Jake looked a little deflated, but heck, I was relieved. The package had gone on a little urban adventure, sure, but it wasn't the start of some shadowy conspiracy or urban legend. But then here's the thing, while the package turned out to be less mysterious than we hoped, the whole wild chase revealed something pretty neat about us too. Jake, with all his detective energy and notebooks full of theories, had dragged me out of my comfort zone. I realized I'd grown kind of attached to our impromptu sleuthing sessions, even when I was the skeptic, even when I was the voice of reason telling Jake to chill out. And Jake? Well, this package gave him a fresh kind of spark. Beyond the usual geeky curiosity, he seemed to appreciate having someone like me around to balance the madness. We both found a new rhythm in our tiny apartment, bouncing between Jake's investigative streak and my laid-back grounding. So yeah, at the end of it all, no secret society, no hidden treasures. Just two roommates who'd accidentally turned a misdelivered box into an unexpected adventure. The question now? Are we really ready for all the surprises that come with living together? Especially when there's always some random mystery waiting at the door? Guess we'll find out. Because if this package taught us anything, it's that in our little apartment above the chaotic city streets, normal is just a setting, not a rule. And honestly, I'm kind of looking forward to whatever weirdness rolls in next.